Now, as the phasing player, the Seleucids, as the phasing player, they get to decide where to start and which combats to fight first. Now, it's important to note that each of these units squaring off against one another are separate combats. So it's kind of important to pick which combat you're going to fight first. It's kind of like DBX in a way, if you're familiar with that. In our case, let's start off with the elephant. He's going to fight the combat there between the elite elephant and the Roman Triarii. And we'll see how that goes. Now, both sides are going to roll dice. I'm going to apply some modifiers. If you remember, the elephant here is elite. So let's roll his dice right off the bat and see what we're going to come up with. Now, if he gets a 1 to 3, he's going to get a +1 for his quality, which is elite. Yeah, I can't get it in the thing here. 5. So he doesn't get the elite bonus. So he's at a 5 so far. Now he gets a +1 versus everybody. So that's going to be, except mounted. Mounted enemies, he gets a +2. So he's fighting foot. He's going to get a +1. So put that right there. And in addition to that, in the first round of fighting, he's going to get a +1 for impetus. Now, he doesn't get impetus against certain troop types, like lighter troops, but he does against the spears. However, spears typically, if they receive a charge from the front, do cancel mounted troops' impetus, and the elephant's mounted. However, that excludes the elephant. That's how nasty the elephant can be. So the elephant retains his impetus bonus of +1 for the first round only. So he's at +2 right now. Now let's see what the Romans get. There's no other modifiers that apply here, by the way. And things like flank attack or certain types of terrain, or if you're disordered, or etc. I'll make sure I got everything here. Yeah, that's it. So basically, the Romans are going to roll their d6, and they're going to add their basic factor of +1, which is based on their unit type. Heavy spearmen, it says +2 versus light medium infantry in the open, or versus light horse, otherwise +1 versus all. So they'll add a +1 in this situation. They roll a 6, they get a +1 for their basic factor. In addition to that, let me see here, they are elite as well, but they rolled above 4, so they're not going to get a +1 for that. They're already high enough. Outside of that, support factors, basic factors, blah, blah, nothing else. Now, they do usually have impact against mounted enemies, which is the elephant. However, they don't get it against the elephant, if you remember. So they're not going to get impact during this initial combat here. So they're stuck with just a +1. So now we compare the rolls. We got 7 for the Seleucids going against 7 for the Romans. So we're at a tie. So the first thing you do is you compare the differences between them. It's basically a standoff. Neither side gained advantage and nothing happens, basically. One thing to note here is the fact that once units are engaged like this in melee, they're stuck like that, except for a few certain troop types and situations, like cavalry, if their opponent is slower. They can make a disengage move, and that's pretty much the only way you get out of combat. So it's pretty much all or nothing once you make contact and it has begun. Fortunately, you can attempt to rally troops engaged in melee, so that could help the longevity of a certain unit. Okay, now we're going to go to the next combat. That's done. And we'll do the same thing once again. Now in this case, let's see, we'll go here with this unit here that's disordered. So we're going to have pikes going against heavy swordsmen, or heavy infantry. So let's start off with the pikes. They are going to get a +2 right off the bat. That's their base factor. So they're going to roll their dice and add +2. They're not elite, they're just ordinary Seleucids, so 3. They're going to get a +2 as their base factor. Any other modifiers for support? There is none. Nothing for quality, as I said. There is disorder, and that is a -1. So unfortunately, they're going to drop. And it doesn't matter how many cohesion hits they've taken. If there's cohesion hits, you're disordered, period. It's just a simple -1 to the roll. And there's no flank attacks or anything like that, or terrain involved here, or presence of a general, etc. So that's the modifier, 3 + 1. The Romans will do likewise. They're going to be adding +1 as their base factor. but they do have impetus when they're charged from the front against these pikes. So they will get an additional +1. So they're going to get a total of +2. There's no other modifiers. So they're going to be at 6, and the Seleucids are going to be at 4. So they lost. Now the first thing we do is find out, well, the first thing you do is decide who's lost. And in this case, it's going to be the Seleucids. They lost. And by how much? Well, the difference here tells us. We've got 4 against 6, so they lost by 2. So if we look at our chart here, we look up the difference, it's going to result in a loss of 1 cohesion point. If you lose by 1 to 2 points, you lose 1 cohesion. If you lose by 3 or 4, you lose 2 cohesion. If you lose by 5 or 6, you lose 3 cohesion. And if the difference is 7 or more, you're routed, which is not good. So, the Seleucids just took 2 more. Or 1 more, sorry. So they're at 2 cohesion loss. And their cohesion rating, I believe, is 4. So they're halfway there, my friends. Now we'll go to the next combat. And it's basically exactly the same thing. The Romans will get +2, which is impact, as well as their base factor, and the Seleucids will get +2 as well for just their base factor. They don't suffer for being disordered, so it's going to be straight up +2 on both these rolls. So the Seleucids get it, or they lost actually. They lost by 1, which means they take 1 cohesion loss. And you could follow along on the play sheet if you do have it, or in the rule book. The next combat, same exact thing. +2 for both sides. And we get a Romans got a 1 + 2 is 3 against the 5 for the Seleucids. So the Romans lost this time. Now here's something interesting. They lost by 2, as you can tell by the die roll, the Romans. Now the Romans have armor. If you look through your rules, you'll see that there's 3 classifications for armor. There's no armor, there's armor, and then there's heavy armor. Well, these Romans have what's called armor. And how that works in melee is if they lose the combat, which they did, they lost by 2 in this case, they get to add a +1 to the die that was rolled. So instead of losing this combat by 2, they would have lost by 1, as you can see. So that can make a difference in a melee. A difference between how many cohesion hits you'll actually take. But in this case, it doesn't change at all because they still lost by 1 to 2 points, which is in both cases a -1 cohesion. So the Romans took a hit there. So there they go. And we got one more combat. Now in this case, same situation, except this unit is elite. This pike block is elite. So if they roll 1 to 3, they're going to get an additional +1. Otherwise, same modifiers apply. +2 for both sides. And the Seleucids will not get the extra +1 for being elite. So it's a score of 7 for the Seleucids, going against a 6 for the Romans. So the Romans lost again. And here's where that little armor kicks in. Because they lost, they get to add +1 for having better armor than the opponent. I forgot to mention that before, but what you do is you compare the armor of both opponents. The Seleucids do not have armor at all, so they're no armor. If the loser of the combat has better armor, in this case armor for the Romans, they get a 1 added to the die result, which will be the case here. So the Romans scored 6, add 1, it's actually going to be 7 against 5, 6, 7. So it's actually going to be 1 to 1, no effect. So the armor saves them there, as you can see. Pretty useful. I like that little subtle rule. And that ends the close combat. There's no more in contact, and it's as simple as that, folks. There's not much to it. After that would be, if anybody routs, they're marked as, if anyone took their last of their cohesion, they will rout, and we do that now at the end, and there isn't in this case. So we could just finish up the turn, check for victory conditions, and move to the Romans' turn. So that's melee, my friends. So I think what I'll do at this point is maybe jump ahead a couple turns or so in this game and come back and show you another situation involving the melee, and to show you how the battle's going too, because this is actually a little game going on. All right, folks, I'll be back.